I always believed my family was close-knit, but everything changed when my father decided to partner with my uncle in a new venture. It feels like a different life now, one where I remember the warm laughter echoing through our home on Sunday afternoons, where every dinner table was a space of sharing stories and dreams. That all began to shift when my father, tired of the monotony of his job, latched onto a new idea, a spark igniting in his usually steady eyes. "Scarlett, this will change everything," he exclaimed one evening, his voice rising with excitement as he unfurled a series of creative blueprints over the kitchen table. I leaned in closer, my eyes dancing over the colorful sketches of what he had envisioned. From tackle boxes to fishing gear, it was a dream to infuse our family history with something fresh, and I could easily see how he could get lost in the possibilities. Initially, I supported him wholeheartedly, imagining how my father's dream would elevate us all. I spent hours listening to his plans, fully engrossed in how our lives would improve and how proud I would be to stand beside him, my father, the successful entrepreneur. "You know, this time next year will be a household name," he said, a confident grin lighting up his weathered features. Nothing felt better than the infectious optimism radiating from him. It made my heart swell with hope. But soon reality struck like a cold wave crashing against the shore, dragging my father's dreams into murky waters. I could sense it before I saw it, the shift in mood when I entered the room where my father and uncle sat poring over their hastily constructed spreadsheets. My heart sank when I noticed the tension etched into my father's brow, how he rubbed the sides of his temples in frustration. The spark that once lit his eyes began to dim severely. "This isn't what I envisioned," my father admitted one night, the shadows in the kitchen wrapping around us as he leaned against the counter, the light casting a weary glow on his tired face. "I thought we could turn this around." I wanted to believe him, but something dark churned in my stomach. The business was floundering, teetering on the edge of disaster as my uncle's lack of experience only magnified our problems. I could see the numbers flashing on paper like crimson flags, warnings that always sent my pulse racing and fight-or-flight instincts kicking in. I began formation as the glue holding our family together, but the cracks only widened. We were drowning in bills and uncertainty, yet holding on to this fantasy that everything would come together if we just believed hard enough. Each family's knot tightened around my heart, feeling suffocating instead of secure. Then there was me, the suffocating weight of financial struggles crushing me while I desperately clung to hope. "I can help," I ventured cautiously one evening, the air thick with latent desperation as I approached my father in the living room. The walls seemed to loom larger with every passing day. Maybe I could assist with the logistics or research funding options. My father merely waved his hand dismissively, as if brushing a careless fly from his face. "Do not worry, Scarlett. The tide will turn soon." His dismissal stung, echoing loudly against my vulnerabilities. The certainty that he meant well didn't change the fact that my heart sank deeper into despair. I could not shake the feeling that he was trapped like a ship caught in the stormy seas, with my uncle at the helm. Days bled into weeks as the tall walls of our house began to shrink, enveloping me as the storm raged. I lost my job unexpectedly, the very foundation of my independence crumbling beneath me. The stark white envelope that arrived in the mail gave me little clues. The words inside, however, blared out like alarms screaming across a quiet night. "Your position has been eliminated." Each letter hung in the air like a brick, and I felt as if each inch of my history was being dragged back into the darkness. With mounting bills pilling high like unwanted weeds and creeping shadows lurking at the edges of my mind, I soon found myself drowning in over $20,000 of debt. There was a moment, as I paced through the kitchen, surrounded by faded memories of family gatherings that insisted on haunting me. I swallowed hard, pushing my fear beneath layers of grief and frustration. How can everything fall apart so quickly? I thought, the tension in my chest tightening. Everything changed so fast, like a gust of wind ripping through a fragile house of cards. The dinner table, once a warm space to share laughter and unity, turned into a battleground where emotions ran high and accusations ran wild, albeit unspoken. I felt betrayed, as my father shielded my uncle, defending the man who treated this business like a sinkhole, dragging down not only my father's hopes, but our whole family's aspirations. The tension crackled as heavy as the meals that were shared with tight smiles. I could almost hear the unsaid words lurking, waiting for the right moment to strike. One evening, as I shuffled quietly into the living room after a day of tossing and turning in bed, I overheard them arguing. "You need to take responsibility," my father's voice rang out, anger and pain mingling together. "We're losing everything. You knew how much was at stake." Rage flared within me, but I froze at the doorway, observing the two men I once placed on pedestals become shadows of their former selves, my uncle's defiance crashing against my father's disappointment. I peered unnoticed into the scene. "It wasn't just me, you made this choice too." My uncle's voice was defensive, teetering on resentment. "I thought we were partners." A weight settled heavy in the pit of my stomach, an unfamiliar mix of anger and helplessness coiling tighter and tighter. I clenched my fists, my mind racing with thoughts. Were they mad at each other or at the situation? Was it my father who had ushered this disaster into our lives? Was it my uncle's whimsical approach that had dashed our hopes? When my father eventually left the room, running a hand through his hair, I stepped backward, drawing back into the shadows. It killed me to witness the family that once felt so solid crack and splinter with every argument. My father's glaring favoritism toward my uncle became unbearable. I wanted to confront him, to ask him why he could not see how unfair the entire situation was, how it was slashing our family ties with such ruthless abandon. I longed to confront him when he turned back to the living room, as if maybe unleashing my frustration would break the cycle that had captured us all. Did he not notice how my victories were trampled upon, replaced only by sympathy for his brother? "I am just trying to keep everything afloat," he would say, but my heart refused to listen to false assurances that fell hollow like echoes against the walls. "This is not just business. This is our lives, our family." The words danced on the tip of my tongue, but somehow I remained paralyzed, afraid of the possibility that unleashing my anger would create an explosive fracture we could never repair. The slick paper documenting the debts we owed felt like chains binding me in place, teasing me with how expectations had throttled my dreams while letting my family linger in a noose of disappointment and resentment. It was an irony too morbid to grasp, watching how our pursuit of success led to a complete unraveling of who we were. Sliding down against a corner of the wall, I felt tears welling in my eyes. My dreams felt as shattered as the fine china my mother had passed down, each piece delicate and beautiful yet now lost to time. Inside, bitter flames of revenge began to stir. In that moment, I decided I would expose the truth. I would find a way to peel back the facade, to show my father that my uncle was not worth this cost, not worth sacrificing our family. But how? That was the most significant question hanging at the periphery of my thoughts. I had nothing but internal struggles wrestling within me, but I needed a plan, a roadmap to navigate through this web of deceit and familial disillusionment. This time, I would take charge of my life, turning my pain into purpose, but I needed to think carefully before risking losing the only remaining threads of family left to me. And so, as the shadows danced around me under the dim light, I resolved to play my part carefully, a silent observer weaving through this messy tangle of loyalty and betrayal, one calculated move at a time. The tide would turn, just not how my father expected. The storm was brewing, and I would be the one to set it loose. It felt like my heart was trapped in a cage, each beat a reminder of my struggles. As I sat in the small, dimly lit room cluttered with boxes of things I had once treasured, the weight of uncertainty pressed down on me like a thick fog. I looked around the room, taking in the remnants of my family's past, old photos, dusty books, and heirlooms that had been passed down through generations. They now lay scattered like hopes I had for my future, overshadowed by my current reality. My fingers brushed against an ornate silver locket that had belonged to my grandmother. I picked it up, its cool surface a stark contrast to the heat rising in my chest. The beautiful engraving on it whispered tales of a time when our family was whole, when we celebrated together rather than tearing each other apart. I couldn't bear to part with it, but I had already sold too much, and each transaction felt like a stab in my heart. I needed to keep my home, to keep myself from drowning under debt and despair. Desperate times called for desperate measures. "Just one more job," I muttered to myself, scrolling through yet another listing on my phone. I had been up all night combing through job boards, furiously applying for everything under the sun, customer service, retail, even freelance gigs that required skills I barely had. My eyes felt heavy, but I couldn't afford to be tired. I had to keep fighting. With each rejection email, I felt another piece of me shatter. "You are overqualified," they said. "Thank you for your application, but we have decided to move forward with another candidate." It was infuriating. I wanted to scream at them, to shake them until they understood my desperation. But all I could do was breathe deeply and push onward. My father, on the other hand, remained blissfully ignorant of my turmoil while he devoted his time and resources to my uncle's ventures. I could almost hear the sparkle in his voice every time he mentioned my uncle and the so-called partnership that was going to skyrocket them to success. "Your uncle has such vision, Scarlett. I can't believe how he has turned things around with that new project," he gushed, and each word twisted in my gut like a knife, deepening my resentment. Did he not see how we were losing everything? How the bills piled up on the counter like a mountain of despair, casting a shadow over my hope? Or was it easier for him to blind himself to the truth, to pretend everything would be fine while I sank further into a pit of despair? "Hey, Dad," I had once said, my voice breaking as I tried to approach him about our dire situation. "Can we talk? I need some help." I felt the lump in my throat as the words came out. I desperately needed his support, his acknowledgement that I existed beyond the realm of my uncle's ambitions. "Not now, Scarlett. Can't you see I am busy?" He replied without even looking up from his newspaper. I felt my heart sink. I wanted to scream, to shake him by the shoulders, to make him see the chaos growing in my life. Instead, I stood frozen, a forgotten child in the shadow of a giant, and watched him turn the page. I could feel my insides twist, my breath hitching in my throat. The world around me seemed to blur, and I wanted to run away and hide, burying myself beneath a mountain of blankets, escaping the sounds of laughter and dreams that rang muffled from the other room, all centered around my uncle's bright future. The holidays were especially brutal. During a family gathering one evening, I had decided it was finally time to stand up for myself. Thoughts raced through my head like a storm, and I could feel my pulse quickening as I walked into the living room, the air thick with laughter and the smell of food. My uncle was the center of attention, regaling a tale about some imagined success while the rest of the family hung on his every word. I couldn't hold back any longer. "Can we talk about something real for a second?" I spoke up, trying to inject urgency into my voice as I aimed it towards my dad. The laughter faded, and a hush fell over the room, a collective wall of silence that stung like icy water. My uncle shot me a look, and I could see the flicker of irritation in his eyes, like I had just crashed a party that was meant for winning. "Scarlett, not now." My father's voice was flat, devoid of any interest. He waved me off like an annoyance, and the dismissive flick of his hand felt like a slap across my face. "Dad, we need to talk about our finances. We are losing our house." I pressed, desperation clawing at my throat. I glanced around, searching for allies, but the room was filled with faces stony as marble, unwilling to engage with reality after yet another luxurious meal on a table lined with expensive dishes. "You have to stop this. You made your bed, Scarlett," my father said casually, as if my life was an afterthought, the words spilling from his lips devoid of any hint of remorse or understanding. "You should be working harder instead of whining. Sometimes we just need to face the consequences of our choices." Each word was like a dagger, piercing straight through me. I felt my chest tighten, my vision blurring with tears. "I am working hard. I am trying as much as I can. I am losing everything. I've sold heirlooms, taken odd jobs, and still it's not enough. I thought family was supposed to support each other." My voice cracked, and a wave of vulnerability washed over me. Yet his eyes remained cold, unfazed as he focused on his plate, uninterested in my plight. "You have to take responsibility," he said, indifferently. "You decide to let things get out of control. Don't expect others to fix your mistakes." I could feel the tremors in my hands, anger boiling in my veins like lava. How could he say this? How could he treat me as if I were nothing more than a burden? At that moment, I snapped. I stood there, a storm building inside me, a whirlwind of hurt and betrayal. I had spent years in his shadow, hoping for recognition, fighting for a place in his heart, only to be met with indifference. It was as if I was a ghost in my own life. All the years spent trying to earn my father's approval surged back, demanding acknowledgement. The countless times I had sacrificed my own dreams for family obligations haunted me. The love I tried to give, the acceptance I craved, all wrapped in a delicate package that seemed forever out of my reach. My family had gathered in jovial camaraderie while I stood isolated, invisible behind the masks of laughter. I was tired of being the forgotten one, the invisible child watching from the sidelines as my uncle bathed in adoration. A manic desire to be seen, to be recognized and appreciated, soared through me like a wild wind. "I will take control of my own destiny," I declared, startling my relatives. The words came forth, igniting a fire in my belly. If you cannot see me for who I am, then I will make you see me. Staring directly into my father's shocked expression, I felt a rush of determination replace the waves of despair. The anger coursing through me morphed into a new kind of resolve, like steel being molded by fire. This was it. No more being overlooked. I was done being easy prey. I turned away, locking eyes momentarily with my uncle, who sat enshrined in some false glory. I wanted him to see me too, wanted to wipe that smug smile off his face. "You think this is over?" I whispered fiercely to myself as I exited through the door. The laughter behind me faded, but no one chased after me. They were all wrapped in their blissful ignorance. As I stepped outside, the night air hit my face like a cold slap, clearing my head. I took deep breaths, feeling alive and raw. The stars glittered overhead, brilliant spots of light against the dark sky. I could not be the passive victim anymore. I would rise from the ashes they would leave in their wake, stronger and fiercer. I had thought for so long that I was a victim in this story, trapped in a cycle of despair and neglect. But now, it was clear, I was the hero of my own narrative. And I knew what I had to do. I would rise again, reforge my life, and show them exactly how wrong they were to overlook me. I would take back everything they had unwittingly taken from me. The battle had just begun, and I was ready, fire ignited in my chest, as I sat at the small, cluttered desk in my dimly lit room, the walls lined with forgotten dreams, and the lingering sense that something essential was slipping through my fingers. With the faint hum of my computer casting a blue glow across the papers scattered like fallen leaves around me, I felt the heaviness of betrayal intensify with each painstaking hour I devoted to uncovering my uncle's dark secrets. Shadows danced across my face as I scrolled through ancient articles, financial reports, and court cases buried under layers of deception and greed. The dim light flickered and faintly illuminated the fatigue etched into my skin. Late nights had become my silent companions, haunting me with thoughts of what my uncle had done, the profits made at the expense of others, the lives affected. My eyes narrowed more with each revelation, my anger boiling like water on the brink of a rolling boil. "I will find a way to make him pay," I whispered into the silence, a promise to myself that dripped with venom and resolve. I recalled moments from my childhood that felt like fragments of a dream, moments overshadowed by the image of my uncle's warm smile and the golden locks of success that draped over his shoulders. Now I saw him for who he truly was, a man blinded by ambition, a monstrous figure lurking in the shadows of our family, twisting loyalty into something ugly, distorting trust into betrayal. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I uncovered layer after layer of financial mismanagement and unethical business practices. How could I have let myself be blinded by love? I thought bitterly, feeling the weight of misplaced loyalty rest heavily upon my shoulders. The unsettling truths began to form a tangled web that mirrored my own life. Unpaid debts, embezzlement, and a deceptive financial facade that wouldn't hold up under even the slightest scrutiny. I felt as if I were piecing together a puzzle that revealed a face I never recognized. "You brought this on yourself," I hissed to my uncle's image captured in glowing pixels, and with each piece of evidence I collected, bank drafts, questionable transactions, emails that dripped with insincerity, I could feel the framework of my revenge solidifying into something tangible, something that could shake the very foundation of his empire. Days turned into weeks. I met with some of the partners who had remained hesitant to invest further into the failing business, and as I shared the facts I had uncovered, their expressions morphed from disbelief to shock. I could see their brows deeply furrowing, their fingers lacing together in nervous anticipation, and I could practically hear the gears turning in their heads. One partner, a once enthusiastic supporter of my uncle, leaned back in his chair as if struck physically by my revelations. "You have to be joking, right?" "This is a joke," he stammered, his voice wavering. I shook my head, feeling an eerie satisfaction at unveiling the truth. "I wish it were, but this is real. This is what is happening. I have all the evidence." The room grew thick with tension, a heavy silence falling as their reactions spiraled from disbelief to dread. To them, I was like the harbinger of doom, armed with undeniable proof of my uncle's transgressions. As the meeting date approached, anticipation coiled in my stomach like a serpent ready to strike. I could feel the cool bite of anxiety as it snaked through my veins. I knew my actions would hurt my family, but the thought of being collateral damage within this tangled web of misplaced loyalty propelled me forward. I replayed the upcoming confrontation in my mind repeatedly, the faces of those partners etched into my memory with an urgency that felt almost consuming. The meeting would be my stage, the revealing of my uncle's deceptive practices, turning the spotlight onto his greed. Finally, the fateful day arrived, darkness weaving its way across the sky like a cloak. I stood in the shadows of that room, my heart pounding, echoes of doubts rushing up like a haunting tide threatening to sweep my resolve away. The air was heavy with tension, like the moment before a storm breaks, thick enough that I could almost taste it. A metallic tang mingled with the faint scent of fresh coffee that hung in the air, making my stomach twist. As I watched investors shuffle in, some whispering excitedly, others looking cautious, I felt a fire building deep within me. "This is your moment," I whispered to myself, steadying my breath and pushing down the creeping doubts that threatened to surface. A murmur of voices filled the room, swirling around me, but I stayed focused, my gaze sharp and unwavering. I clenched my hands, feeling the cool metal of the flash drive nestled in my pocket, the digital carrier of the truth I was ready to unleash. Moments passed in a blur, the familiar faces of my uncle's partners flooding the room, completely unaware of the storm that was about to unleash upon them. My uncle entered last, his presence swallowing the room whole, confidence radiating off him like a sour perfume. He had the charming smile and polished demeanor of a man unscathed, so typically convincing, but I could see the cracks forming beneath the surface, the fear hinted in his eyes almost imperceptible to others. "Thank you all for coming," he said, standing tall at the head of the table. "We are on the brink of a major breakthrough." I felt bile rise in my throat as he spoke those sugar-coated words, the room hanging on every syllable, blissfully unaware of the truth lurking beneath. I wanted to scream at them to open their eyes, to look beyond his practiced expressions and see the chaos he had orchestrated. That breakthrough, I thought darkly, is built on lies. As he continued to present his carefully crafted speech, I fidgeted with the flash drive, waiting like a predator poised to pounce, heart racing, adrenaline coursing through my veins like wildfire. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. As he waxed poetic about future successes that would never come, I felt an icy resolve wash over me. With a deep breath, I stepped forward from the shadows, the light cascading down onto me for the first time, illuminating my face and drawing the attention of the room. Heads turned and silence enveloped the space. "Excuse me, I need to interrupt," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady, though inside I felt a storm raging. Everyone's eyes focused on me, curiosity mixed with concern as they registered my presence. My uncle's confident mask faltered for a split second, the glint of surprise flashing across his face. I took a step closer, the air crackling with tension and anticipation. "What if I told you everything he has shown you is a lie?" Gasps erupted throughout the room, confusion darting across the faces surrounding the table. "I have evidence of financial mismanagement, unethical decisions, even embezzlement. This is not a grand opportunity, it is a sinking ship." "Scarlett, what are you talking about?" My uncle's voice sliced through the murmurs, laced with frustration and an undeniable sense of panic as he attempted to regain control. "No, don't interrupt me," I snapped back, surprised even at my own boldness, heart thudding heavily against my ribcage. "You lied to these people. You have deceived everyone for your own greed, and I have the proof right here." I pulled out the flash drive, holding it up like a trophy gleaming in the light. "Scarlett," he nearly shouted, his face flushed, voice rising in desperation. "You cannot do this. You are talking about our family." "Is that what you call this?" I asked, incredulous. "Family. You have turned your back on everything that matters. You thought you could get away with it, but I will not let you do this any longer. You are ruining lives while hiding behind a cloak of familial loyalty, and it ends today." With my heart pounding thunderously, filled with a mixture of defiance and clarity, I pressed forward, fueled by the weight of truth and evidence ready to break free. These people deserve the truth, and more importantly, they deserve justice. I have seen the financial documents, the emails that lay clear your wrongdoing. This isn't just about business, this is about the people you've hurt in the process. His face twisted with anger and disbelief. "You will ruin everything. This is your family we are talking about." I steadied my breath, my resolve hardening. "You made your choice, Uncle. Perhaps now it's time for the family to see just how deep this betrayal runs. You have no idea how deep your lies go." The room was nothing short of electric, tension tighter than a bowstring, anticipation crackling in every corner as my uncle's voice struggled to contain the chaos rising within him. I was standing at the precipice of my revenge, poised to release everything I had gathered. This was my moment. I felt a sense of power I had not felt in years, a feeling that surged through my veins, compelling me to press forward. The walls that had kept me subdued for so long crumbled around me. And as I looked around at the multitude of faces, I could see fear, shock, anger, and an understanding beginning to form. No one is immune to the truth, I thought as I took a steadying breath before unleashing the evidence that would shatter my uncle's world. And finally reclaim my worth. The room was charged with tension as I stood before the partners, a wave of exhilaration washing over me as I prepared to unveil truths that had remained shackled behind a veil of deception for far too long. The sleek, polished conference table before me, littered with half-drunk cups of coffee and stacks of glossy reports, felt like an arena, and I was the gladiator, armed with my revelations. I adjusted my grip on the stack of documents standing proudly at the forefront of the gathering. "Ladies and gentlemen," I started, my voice steady despite the tempest of emotions swirling within. "Today, I present to you not just the numbers, but the reality behind those numbers." A few eyes darted toward my uncle, seated at the far end of the table. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his usually confident demeanor crumbling as I continued. "I have gathered evidence of systematic failures and fraudulent bookkeeping that will deeply affect our investments and partnerships." As I spoke, I felt a thrill run through me, a sense of power that drove back the lingering doubts I had faced in preparing for this moment. I flipped open the first document, a carefully crafted chart depicting a timeline of my uncle's financial discrepancies, a timeline that had been hidden under layers of deceit. As I adjusted my glasses and pointed to the chart, a collective gasp erupted from the audience. "Look here," I articulated, allowing the gravity of my words to settle between us. "This chart shows the consistent losses we've been sustaining for the last 2 years, losses attributed to mismanaged funding and deceptive bookkeeping. All of you believed in his charm and finesse, but look at the truth staring back at you." The faces before me contorted with disbelief. Some partners squinted as if trying to decipher a riddle, while others exchanged anxious glances. I took a deep breath, emboldened. The unexpected expenses reported in recent months? Lies upon lies. These are inflated and fabricated numbers designed to mask the embezzlement happening right under our noses. I turned another page, revealing a meticulous breakdown of each flawed project, neatly juxtaposing expense reports alongside inflated income logs. They began to lean forward, captivated. I sensed their interest threshold shifting from curiosity to incredulity, and there was no turning back. "You can see here," I pointed vigorously, "that nearly 50% of what was invested in the last project was never allocated towards production. Instead, it was funneled away." Each word cut through the air, their weight felt like a sledgehammer breaking through the facade. I caught a glimpse of my uncle's face, the color draining from it like paint left out in the sun, revealing a mask of pure panic. In his eyes, I was sure I saw betrayal, disappointment, and perhaps the fraying threads of pride. With every passing second, I felt invigorated, almost alive in a surreal way. This was what revenge was meant to taste like. The mere idea of exposing him and the world he had built on deceit was intoxicating. Disbelief turned into murmurs, faint whispers accumulating like charged particles in the air. "Scarlett, are you sure about this?" One partner, skeptical and hesitant, voiced the concern I had anticipated. This can't be right. William has always been trustworthy." With a slow, deliberate nod, I responded, "That trust, my friends, has been manipulated for his gain." I allowed my gaze to sweep the room, capturing their reactions, the tension palpable, crackling like electricity. Doubt began to claw at the edges of their loyalty, and it was almost meditative watching their minds wrestle with the truth. I felt a sudden surge of defiance rise up within me, and my voice carried through the somber air, commanding attention. "Am I the first to question it, the first to speak up, or were all of you too enthralled by the sheen of deception?" The questions hung in the air, heavy, resonating with the gravity of what was unfolding. My father, seated close to my uncle, looked pale and lost, his brows knitting together. I could see the realization dawning upon him, a tide of recognition crashing over him. Had he really been blind to it, to the man he had trusted more than family? My heart raced as I continued to hold their attention. I would expose this colossal family failure. I would show that my uncle's web of lies was far more significant than any legacy he had created. With every detail I presented, partners began stirring, whispers of doubt blossoming into shouts of betrayal. How could we have let this happen? One gentleman, thick and burly, slapped his hand against the table, rattling the mugs, startling a few. What do you mean, losses? We trusted him. We poured our lifeblood into this. That trust was ill-placed, I swiftly replied, but instead of the burning indignation I expected, there was an odd sense of calm that brushed over me. The figures you trusted were, in truth, illusions, a beautifully orchestrated performance hiding the sheer recklessness. More documents followed, each presenting evidence of my uncle's audacity, laying bare the web of deceit that he had spun with every sensuous word he had uttered over dinners and meetings. The room crackled with intensity, a concoction of disbelief and rage that began to spill over as partners witnessed the unraveling empire in real time. I knew I could not falter now. I had the upper hand, and I shoved another report into their hands, this one revealing loan documents riddled with lies. You see this? Loan agreements, overly inflated collateral rates drawn solely from inflated projections. We've been blinding ourselves to his machinations. I stepped back, reveling in the chaos I had wrought while my uncle sat like a specter, a ghost of his former self. The nagging guilt I thought would dissolve me felt strangely absent, replaced by the sweet taste of vindication that colored my perceptions. It was my moment now, and I owned it. The furor erupted more violently, partners standing, throwing out accusations haphazardly, fingers pointed at him like accusing arrows. You deceived us. How long were you planning to keep this charade up? This is beyond betrayal, it's unthinkable. Each word hammered against my uncle until he could do little but sit in silence, trapped within the jagged edges of his own making. I never would have believed this could happen, one partner murmured, their tone tipping towards anger. We're talking about the man who guided us, who united our resources. A harsh laugh escaped my lips involuntarily. United, more like exploited. My uncle finally found his voice again, feeble and cracked as if realizing the futility of his previous charm. Scarlett, this is not how we do business in our family. I cut him off, feeling the tension spiral higher. Our family? You think this was ever about family? You made it a business of betrayal. With each shred of control I claimed, the partner's shock echoed my own internal triumph. The power I had stashed away for so long was now spilling out, intoxicatingly fierce. I turned my attention back to my father, watching closely as veins pulsed at his temples and the flicker of conflict swept across his face. At long last, the veil of loyalty to my uncle was lifting, and understanding washed over his features. It felt like freeing a bird from a cage, my heart twisted with bittersweet sorrow. You trusted him? He wouldn't meet my eyes, focusing instead on the charts sprawled out before us like the aftermath of a battle. Dad, I needed you to see, I said, emotion creeping into my voice. I didn't want this to be just my fight. Partners crescendoed in their chaos around us, rage giving birth to frustration and bewilderment as my uncle's empire began to crumble. I wanted to protect you from the truth, Scarlett, he replied quietly, voice almost drowned by the clamor. But I see now, I see it all. It was a confession I never expected to hear, laden with his own revelations of guilt and consequence. The irony of my uncle's recklessness was unfolding like a tangled ball of yarn, and every partner in the room had become an unsuspecting observer. But I had shifted their perceptions, turning their loyalty from a blind trust into a weapon. As each minute dragged on, my uncle shrank further into his seat while the scale tipped decidedly in my favor. I could feel it. This was no longer just about revenge. It was about reclaiming power that had been unjustly stripped away, about shedding the layers of doubt that had smothered me for so long. I had ignited a fire that could not be extinguished, a chain reaction that would dismantle the empire he had forged through lies. With the credibility he had wielded like a sword slowly crumbling away, I raised my voice above the commotion, determined to hit the final note in this orchestrated symphony of facts. Ladies and gentlemen, this isn't just about my uncle or his flawed operations. This is about us, about our future and our trust. It ends here. I urge all of you, reach deep within yourselves and pull back from this toxic relationship. We cannot build towers on shaky foundations. Silence had fallen over the gathering, a heavy shroud thick with realization and disbelief. I stood firm, chest heaving from the rush of adrenaline, waiting with bated breath to absorb the outcome of what I had unleashed. Would my unyielding determination break the very chains that had shackled all of us? Would my family see reason, or were we all too far gone? The answer came rushing at me, like the tide, relentless. With a final look at my uncle, I saw the remnants of the man I once admired vanishing, revealing only the hollow shell of a liar. This was my moment, my revenge, and no one could take that from me. The air in the room felt thick, heavy, almost sticky with the weight of unspoken words as I stood beside the window, gazing out at the world beyond. The sun had set, casting a deep crimson hue across the horizon, rich and vibrant, reflecting the tumult within me. I watched as my father paced back and forth, his brow furrowed, the lines on his face deepening with every step he took. It was as if he were trying to walk away from the reality of our family's crumbling status, away from the shame that cloaked us like a dense fog. The silence that surrounded us was deafening. I could hear the ticking of the clock, each second a reminder of the inescapable truth we all faced. "Dad," I said finally, my voice breaking the stillness like a stone thrown into a pond, sending ripples through the air between us. "You know this wasn't your fault." That felt both true and false at the same time, an awkwardly balanced truth I was trying to hold on to while also acknowledging that a part of me felt exhilarated at our new reality. He stopped pacing, turning to face me, his eyes clouded with an emotion I couldn't quite decipher: regret, guilt, sadness, or perhaps a mixture of all three. "But it does connect to me, doesn't it? Your uncle's failure was his responsibility, but it has brought our family down as well." His voice was hoarse, like he had been swallowing glass, each word a challenge. The space between us felt charged, electric, and I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Family ties can sometimes feel more like chains than bonds, can't they? I didn't want to sound harsh, but there was a defiance bubbling beneath the surface. The truth is, I felt like a shadow in this family, always outshone by everyone else's successes, waiting for my turn while being neglected. What happened has given me the chance to break free. "Scarlett," he warned, a hint of desperation creeping into his tone. "You don't mean that. You should not find joy in your uncle's misery." And there it was, his disappointment, like a sharp knife right in my gut. I had not intended to wound him, yet the stabbing truth remained. "I'm not happy about his downfall, but I feel like for the first time I can breathe. For so long, I was the unseen one, the lesser daughter. But now," I paused, the realization bubbling within me, "I have my moment. I have reclaimed something that felt lost." He looked away, his gaze casting down toward the floor as if the tiles held the answer to our tangled emotions. "But at what cost?" he finally asked, the weight of his voice hanging low like the impending storm clouds. "Your relationships matter, Scarlett. You are tearing apart your family in the process. Am I, or am I just no longer pretending to be something I am not?" The words slipped out before I could halt them. "I was never the good daughter. You wanted me to be, but now I feel a sense of liberation." My heartbeat quickened as I thought of all the times I had strained to fit the mold, only to be overlooked, my presence as light as a whisper. "Your uncle is family, Scarlett, no matter the circumstances," he shot back, exasperation evident in his tone. "You could at least show some compassion, especially toward a man who is suffering." "Compassion?" I scoffed, the bitterness swirling in my chest like a raging tempest. When was the last time anyone extended compassion towards me? I was always the afterthought. I made sacrifices, I worked hard to carve a space for myself, but every time I was shoved aside as if I were just the extra baggage. Did anyone even notice my struggles? No. Each word felt like a release, a shred of my pent-up frustration finding its escape. He studied me, his eyes narrowing as if he were searching for a trace of the little girl I used to be, the one who'd often sought his approval, who would perform puppet shows in the living room just to hear his laughter. "Scarlett, this hunger for revenge is not the answer. Losing your family, your uncle, your mother, and even me is not worth whatever fleeting power you feel you've gained." I didn't shrink back this time. Instead, I stepped closer, fists clenched at my sides. "It is not about revenge, it's about setting the record straight. I deserve to be recognized just as much as anyone else." My voice was steady as I made eye contact, seeking what felt like desperately needed validation. Silence enveloped us again, but this time it was different. It was tinged with an understanding. I could see that he was grappling with this new version of me. My independence, this fearless spirit that had emerged, was both beautiful and terrifying to him. "This isn't how families are supposed to behave," he finally said, his voice softening, barely above a whisper. "Maybe this is exactly what families need sometimes," I answered, crossing my arms as I felt a new strength coursing through me. "To confront the truths we have been hiding from, to acknowledge the wrongs and not be afraid of shaking things up through this mess." The faintest crack of a smile teased his lips, though his eyes were still clouded with worry. "But at what expense, Scarlett? If this continues, what kind of family do we have left?" It was as if he were stepping closer to me from an emotional precipice, looking for somewhere safe to land. "Dad," I said gently, "us being honest with each other about how we feel can lead us to rebuild. You may not see what I see, but for the first time, I am walking toward my dreams instead of lingering in your shadow. I worry that those dreams might blind you to the need for connection, for unity. Success that destroys relationships counts for very little, he said. But does anyone in our family even know what will fulfill them? I countered. I feel like we have been driven by societal expectations, and now I see a flicker of light beyond these collective shadows. Should I really have to dim myself just to fit in? With each statement, I felt the power of my voice grow stronger, bolstered by my emerging sense of self. In that moment, something shifted in the air. My father's shoulders seemed to sag, the tightness around his mouth softening, and suddenly I felt like I was starting to see my father, the man behind the duty, the man who was navigating his own churning emotions. I've always wanted you to thrive, to be better off than I was. Then let me be free, I urged, the intensity of my plea dancing like firelight in my chest. Let this fire that's grown inside me burn bright. Allow me the chance to find my direction, even if it means taking risks that make you uncomfortable. He took a deep breath, a massive sigh that seemed to deflate the tension that surrounded us. I fear that you might lose sight of what is truly important. Maybe what is truly important isn't what you think, I said, my heart pounding as I sought to break through what felt like the final wall of resistance. Maybe it's time for all of us to redefine what our family means. This is my battle, but it does not mean I wish to fight against you. I see that now, he finally said, folding his arms, his voice quieter yet steady, as if he were taking in what I was saying. I recognize your growth, Scarlett. You fought through the shadows, and I can't fault you for that. I just wish it hadn't come to this. I wish it hadn't either, I replied, feeling a flicker of hope in my heart. But we can either dwell in regret, or we can grow stronger. It's time to create our new narrative. And in that moment, I could feel the air shifting gradually, the thick, familiar tension dissipating ever so slightly. It felt like the cracking of ice in spring, a new possibility emerging from a long, unyielding winter. So what happens now? He asked, his brows knitting slightly. I build my life, I said, smiling softly. From the ashes, I will rise. It is my turn to be seen. I will be the architect of my future. He nodded, a hint of that fierce pride I had longed to see flickering in his eyes. Just remember, you do not have to do it alone. Nor do I want to, I replied, feeling the contours of a new beginning forming in the whispers of the evening air. It's a journey we all must undertake. And while the shadows of our family's past still loomed, I felt fortified by a newfound clarity, ready to embrace the future, no longer an afterthought drowned in silence. I was not just the neglected child. I was developing my own story that would ultimately change our family's narrative forever. As the twilight deepened around us and the warmth of the setting sun faded, I felt a spark ignite. No matter what happened, my step toward independence felt like reclaiming a part of myself that had long been buried, and for that, I was truly grateful.